not to let go. Soon some participants begin to adopt the no failing grades idea as if it were their own, and will be manipulated into pressuring the entire group into accepting that proposition. Basically, the consensus strategies like Delphi are based on Marx's theory of alienation, which states that folks will do just about anything to avoid being ostracized, ridiculed, or to otherwise lose face. What happens is that somewhere in the consensus building process there's a switch that confuses, numbs, and freezes normal responses. Aware that something's going wrong but unable to explain or define it, you find yourself tongue-tied. Linguistics professor Dean Gocher, director of the Institute of Authority Research, explains that there appears to be a trigger mechanism that cuts off awareness of impending danger and suppresses the ability to resist, resulting in indecision and eventually capitulation. Between the computer and word of mouth, it's fairly easy for a provocateur to pre-select individuals who are likely to go along with a proposal and thus to pack an audience. Participants against a facilitator-desired proposal are frequently included too, but they're screened in order to ensure they will not be particularly articulate, or that they will sound shrill in their voice, or hysterical, or that they have a reputation for being unorganized in their presentations. So, I hate to say this, but don't be overly flattered if you're asked to serve on a curriculum committee or a task force. The key to resistance, especially in highly charged, well-organized situations, lies in controlling the environment of thought. An environment of thought means determining what a group of individuals is going to think about and for how long. For example, the media has decided that the Michael Jackson fiasco is a hot topic and that it can be made to divert attention from more important subjects. Whoever controls the debate or agenda controls the substance of what's going on, be it a discussion, political issues to be addressed, what news is read on the air and what news is spiked, even what music goes out over the airwaves and what gets no airtime at all. If such control is engineered by an experienced professional in a group setting, a meeting, a focus group, a committee, task force, and so on, no questions will be asked, no views will be aired that deviate from the pre-selected topics. Another tool in the arsenal of pros is the ability to make facts and truths interchangeable. Now think about that. What's the difference between a fact and a truth? Making truths and facts interchangeable involves easing individuals away from thinking about how they personally feel on a topic in the context of their own experience. This is accomplished by placing members of the group into a hypothetical environment, a pretend situation that's essentially foreign to their experience but which requires their involvement. That is, placing you into a what would you do if situation. And by the way, this is why school tests and questionnaires pose hypothetical what would you do if questions, to place the students in an environment that's essentially foreign to their experience but which requires their involvement to pass the test. Done correctly, each individual in the group, or in the case of a pupil questionnaire, each child, will move from traditional or fixed beliefs to a transitional mode of thought in which facts become murky and truth and principle are in conflict. From there, the various views held by the majority can be reworded by the facilitator or teacher for the supposed benefit of the group, until opinions a person walked in the door with will become watered down, distorted, and ill-defined. So the facilitator is basically there to sell you something you don't need in the form of a program, a curriculum, an activity, a viewpoint, a proposal, or a process. They are not there to help the community, school, student, or group decide what to do. They're there to help you do what they, or more likely, their employers want you to do. To accomplish that, the professional will attempt to trick the group into believing that the program, curriculum, or activity or process was your idea. From there, the group will be manipulated so that folks who are still saying to themselves subconsciously, wait a minute, this isn't my idea, are either convinced to change sides or are overwhelmed by the other members of the group. Your job is to force the facilitator, the provocateur, to expose his or her agenda as early on as possible before he gets you to define yours. Okay, so what do we have to do to counteract somebody else's psychological environment? First, we have to determine what the real issue is. You may, for example, find advertised ahead of time some theme for a meeting, which later turns out to be quite different from what you thought it was going to be. Once you get there, everyone will be encouraged to make lists and talk and so on, because then you can't think straight. The goal is to feel out the group, get a handle on where everyone's coming from. So the thing to do is stay quiet for a while. Thus, rule number 2, don't give the provocateur anything to work with until you know why you're there. After you've determined the real issue and committed to keeping yourself quiet, you ask, what is my basic position on this issue? Remember it, and that's rule number 3, establishing your thesis or your real opinion and not to let go of it. Other people, of course, will have the opposite view. Remember, what the provocateur wants is a synthesis of 2 opposing positions, which will be termed a compromise, but it won't be. It will be whatever position the provocateur's boss wants it to be. Okay, let's take a proposal to get to sex education, a program for sex education implemented into 1st grade. What's the first thing you do? People? What's the first thing you do? You determine the issue. Will the issue, the group's reason for meeting, be worded as a new sex education program? No, probably not. They won't tell you that. It will be presented as the problem of AIDS or teen pregnancy or youngster sexual activity. This is what is meant by use of deception. Nobody actually lies, they just withhold the truth and allow you to make mistaken assumptions. So before you go to a meeting, find out who the presenters are going to be, who are the vested interests, that is, who stands to benefit financially from this meeting. Is it the World Resources Institute, the Environmental Defense Fund, the Sierra Club, the World Wildlife Fund? Who? Is there a specific program they may be trying to sell you? Now, the school district, in this case, on the sex education program, may come up with an abstinence program. So you don't want to jump to conclusions, but even if that is on the table, you can be relatively sure that the audience is packed, perhaps with people from Planned Parenthood, to ensure that this program is never adopted. So your problem will remain exactly the same, to determine the real issue and decide your position about it. All right, suppose your position is sexual activity outside of marriage is wrong. What's the antithesis, the opposite of this particular idea? Now, toward what synthesis will the facilitator likely try to move the group or community before any mention of this sex education program to be launched at your school? The desired compromise position will probably go something like this. Since teen sexual activity is unavoidable, youngsters who indulge must do so as safely as possible without consequences and without hurting anybody else. Once the provocateur can get everyone in the group to agree to this position, then she can go about garnering support for anything, from AIDS posters for kindergartners to condoms for 1st graders. It doesn't matter. Anyone who balks will be reminded about the group consensus over and over and over again until most people behave themselves. Some will actually believe the consensus makes sense. Nobody will want to appear stuffy or out of it with the rest of the group, even though most members may have held the same position or thesis you did when they walked in the room. Notice that the counterculture never compromises. This is one of the tell-all giveaways that you're dealing with a pro. For example, if the topic is the environment, you'll never hear a word about global warming being just one theory. If the topic is vouchers or tuition tax credits, you'll never hear a word from the facilitator about working together with homeschoolers. Consensus in the context we're discussing it is always a one-way street. Traditionalists like you will do all the compromising, meaning you'll be railroaded into giving in. The key to the facilitator's success, then,